The Wall Street Journal just dropped a nuclear bomb on the WNBA, and no one saw it coming. In a jaw-dropping opinion piece, the paper raised a question that has been whispered in hushed tones for months. Is Caitlin Clark's treatment in the WNBA a violation of her civil rights? Not just bad calls or harsh fouls, but an actual legal violation of her federal protections as an employee. This isn't a rant from a disgruntled fan. This is one of the most respected business publications in the world, putting the league on blast. And suddenly, the conversation has shifted from courtside drama to courtroom consequences. If you're wondering how serious this is, the article doesn't mince words. It points directly at the WNBA and says the league may have created a hostile work environment. That phrase isn't just dramatic, it's legal. It means Clark's working conditions might not just be unfair, they might be illegal. It means that her right to a safe, non-hostile workplace, guaranteed under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, might be under direct threat. And if that's true, we're talking about a scandal with federal implications, the kind that leads to lawsuits, investigations, and careers crumbling under the weight of congressional subpoenas. The moment the Wall Street Journal enters the chat, everything changes. This isn't Bleacher Report or a hot take YouTuber tossing around conspiracy theories. This is the same publication that CEOs and senators start their mornings with. So when they suggest that the Department of Justice should investigate how a professional athlete is being treated, you better believe the WNBA's front office is in panic mode. Because this isn't just a sports issue anymore. It's a civil rights crisis, and it's unfolding in real time. This opinion piece isn't subtle. It calls out WNBA leadership by name. It accuses them of ignoring a systematic pattern of targeting, of watching the league's biggest star get assaulted night after night without lifting a finger. It paints Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and even NBA Commissioner Adam Silver as passive figures, allowing this to happen under their watch. And the article doesn't stop there. It urges Congress to drag them into hearings, to answer for every bruise, every missed call, and every game Clark was forced to sit out. What we're witnessing isn't just media outrage. It's a full-blown reckoning for a league that might have crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Let's talk numbers, because the math doesn't lie. Caitlin Clark isn't just another rookie. She's the engine driving the WNBA's historic rise. Ratings? Up 366%. App engagement? Up 613%. And merchandise sales? A staggering 601% surge since Clark entered the league. These aren't just good numbers. These are the kind of metrics that save leagues, that write new television deals, that create dynasties. She did for the WNBA what Michael Jordan did for the NBA. Brought out of niche obscurity and into the mainstream spotlight. But instead of celebrating her, the league has, according to this article, turned on her. It's like winning the lottery and then getting sued for having too much money. Instead of protecting their golden goose, they've let her become the target of reckless fouls and unchecked aggression. And from a business standpoint, it's completely irrational, unless there's something else going on. It's not just perception either. Clark has been on the receiving end of 17% of all flagrant fouls in the league. That's double the rate of any other player. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And for civil rights lawyers, patterns like that are pure gold. It's what they call disparate treatment, when someone is subjected to harsher conditions than their peers without a legitimate reason. In court, that kind of data is like dynamite. It's the kind of thing that turns legal theories into multi-million-dollar settlements. When your league's golden girl is getting battered every game and the numbers prove it, that's no longer just bad refereeing. That's negligence. That's discrimination. And here's where things get even more explosive, because players in the league are confirming it. Sophie Cunningham didn't just imply it. She said it on the record. She said, the star player of the league is not being protected. That's not hearsay. That's a player who has played against Clark, watched it unfold with her own eyes, and called it what it is, targeting. It gets worse. Sophie revealed that locker rooms were having conversations about welcoming Clark to the W. In other words, making an example out of her. The targeting wasn't random. It was planned. It was organized. It was malicious. And when your competitors say, this has gone too far, you know it's already way too far. Clark herself has tried to stay composed, but even she couldn't ignore what's happening. She's admitted that everyone is more physical with me and that others don't get called for the same things. That's a polite way of saying there's a double standard, that she's being officiated under a different rule book, that she's being punished. for being too good. And the injuries? They've piled up fast. Clark has already missed 10 games, and the All-Star game, due to injury. During that All-Star game, viewership dropped 55%. That's millions in lost revenue. And when you factor in that her injuries came from plays that would have been considered assault outside the WNBA court, it stops being a coincidence. It becomes negligence. And then came the race conversation, explosive, emotional, and now legally relevant. Asia Wilson publicly suggested that Clark's treatment has racial undertones. That opens a whole new can of legal worms. Because under civil rights law, intent doesn't have to be proven. If a pattern of disparate treatment disproportionately affects a person of a particular race, that alone can be grounds for federal intervention. The article invokes landmark cases like Harris versus Forklift Systems and Texas Department of Community Affairs versus Burdine. These aren't sports references. These are legal precedents. They define what it means to have a hostile work environment, what it means to be subjected to discriminatory practices. And according to the Wall Street Journal, Clark checks those boxes. The legal path is already laid out. All that's missing is a plaintiff. The Wall Street Journal didn't just throw around vague legal buzzwords. They pulled directly from real federal cases that defined civil rights law for decades. One of the key cases they cited is Harris versus Forklift Systems Incorporated, a landmark 1993 Supreme Court decision that clarified what a hostile work environment truly means under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. This case made it crystal clear you don't need to suffer economic injury or lose your job to prove your rights have been violated. All that's required is that the conduct was severe or pervasive enough to create an environment that a reasonable person would find intimidating, hostile, or abusive. Let's just pause for a second and apply that standard to Caitlin Clark's reality. Flagrant fouls, physical targeting, hostile locker room intentions, public snubs, exclusion from Olympic rosters, and an alarming lack of protective action from league leadership. Does that not sound like a hostile environment to any reasonable observer? If the average employee experienced even half of this at a regular job, HR would be in DEFCON 1. And yet, in the WNBA, this is being normalized, even applauded by some. That's why Harris is such a legal game changer in this context. It widens the scope of civil rights violations beyond overt racism or sexism. It accounts for patterns, for tone, for workplace culture. It understands that psychological and emotional harm are just as real as physical or financial harm. And when applied to Clark's situation, it becomes clear she's not just in a tough rookie year. She's operating in the battlefield, and the referees, they've left their whistles in the locker room. But the Wall Street Journal didn't stop with Harris. They also referenced Texas Department of Community Affairs versus Burdine, a 1981 Supreme Court decision that reshaped how courts handle claims of disparate treatment under Title VII. The core message? If an employee shows they were treated differently from others in a similar position, the burden of proof shifts to the employer to justify that treatment. In this case, that means the WNBA would have to explain why Clark gets battered on court while others don't, and why nobody seems to be held accountable for it. Let's say Clark were to take this to court. Her legal team would start by laying out the evidence, statistical data on flagrant fouls, comparisons of officiating standards, quotes from players and coaches, even public comments from team owners. Then, per Burdine, the burden would shift. The WNBA would have to come up with a legally sufficient, non-discriminatory reason for this pattern of targeting and lack of protection. And that is a position no league ever wants to be in. Now imagine what happens when internal communications come into play. Emails, Slack messages, meeting notes. If any executive coach or referee has ever joked about Clark being too hyped or mentioned letting her take a few hits to learn the ropes, that's not just inappropriate. That's courtroom evidence. And under discovery rules, those communications can and will be subpoenaed. This is where so many discrimination cases are won or lost. That's why the Wall Street Journal's reference to federal precedent is so damning. They're not speculating. They're building a case on paper, in public. They're laying down the exact legal roadmap a future lawsuit might follow. And with every day the WNBA delays action, that roadmap becomes more and more likely to be used. This isn't alarmism. This is the blueprint for a full-blown federal legal crisis. And it's being laid out by business journalists, not sports commentators. That tells you just how real the threat is. When major financial publications start drawing lines between workplace hostility and Title VII violations, it means someone behind the scenes is already preparing for litigation, and the league should be shaking in its Nikes. Let's not forget, civil rights cases don't require explicit animus to be successful. The law recognizes that discrimination often hides in patterns, in omissions, in subtle, systemic behaviors. If Clark's legal team can show she was treated unfairly in a way that differently impacted her because of her identity, be it race, gender, or even perceived favoritism, that's enough to launch a lawsuit. And with the data already on the table, that argument is stronger than the WNBA thinks. And then there's the retaliation factor. Lawyers don't just look at what happened. They look at how the organization responded. Did the league investigate? Did they step in? Or did they ignore the warnings, double down, and let the abuse continue unchecked? That's where the legal risk amplifies exponentially, because ignoring abuse after it's been raised is often worse than the abuse itself in the eyes of the law. If Clark were anyone else, this might not be such a powder keg, but she's the face of the league. She's a reason the WNBA is even relevant to mainstream audiences right now. Her name sells jerseys, fills stadiums, drives TV deals, and brings in sponsors. And when your most valuable asset says she's being mistreated, when your competitors say it, when the media says it, and when federal law backs it, your silence becomes indefensible. The Wall Street Journal also subtly points toward Title IX-style enforcement precedents, referencing what happened when the U.S. Department of Education cracked down on schools for gender inequities in sports. That wave of enforcement reshaped college athletics across the country. Now imagine that power turned toward a professional league. Imagine the headlines. DOJ launches civil rights investigation into WNBA. Sponsors would flee. Investors would panic. The damage would be catastrophic. What makes this even more surreal is that all of this is unfolding in public. The data is out there. The fouls are televised. The snubs are reported. The evidence is already visible. No hidden files required. It's like watching a legal drama play out in real time. Except this time, the protagonist is a real person and the consequences are national. What the WNBA doesn't seem to grasp is that precedent is everything in law. And Clark's case, if it ever becomes official, would set one. Not just for women's basketball, not just for sports, but for workplace rights in high-profile, high-pressure environments everywhere. That's why this moment matters. This isn't just a sports controversy. It's a potential landmark civil rights case in disguise. If mishandled, the WNBA won't just lose ratings or ticket sales. It could lose its legal privileges, its public trust, and its financial lifeline. And the irony is almost tragic. A league built on the promise of equality, empowerment, and representation, now accused of violating those very values at the expense of the one player keeping it afloat. Caitlin Clark isn't just a rookie. She may be the most important plaintiff women's sports has ever seen. And if she decides to speak out, not with a jump shot, but with a lawsuit, it could change everything. Add to this the Olympic snub, the league's most popular player left off the Team USA roster. Combine that with public comments from ownership, like Sheila Johnson saying Clark didn't deserve Athlete of the Year, and it all starts to form a pattern of retaliation, a pattern of exclusion, a pattern that any civil rights attorney would salivate over. And here's where the storm clouds really start to gather, because Washington is watching. Senator Jim Banks has already sent a letter to WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert demanding answers. Congress is on alert if they move forward with hearings, and the article says they should. Engelbert and even Adam Silver could be forced to testify under oath, and the nation will be watching as they explain in real time why their biggest star is being treated like a punching bag. Workplace safety falls under the Labor Department, and if they get involved, we're not talking fines, we're talking lawsuits. If the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division steps in, that's even worse, because those are the investigators who don't stop until every email, every meeting note, every whistleblower has been examined. When federal agents start sniffing around, businesses tremble. And for the WNBA, this could be apocalyptic. And then there's the antitrust bomb. Professional sports leagues operate under special exemptions that allow them to behave like monopolies. But if Congress reconsiders those privileges, the WNBA could be forced to compete like any other business. That means more regulation, fewer protections, and a complete overhaul of how they operate. That's the kind of thing that keeps commissioners up at night. You don't need a legal degree to see what's happening when Clark isn't on the court. The Fever's recent winning streak has been noticeably less physical. The difference in how the games are officiated is like watching two different leagues. And that's the kind of side-by-side evidence that lawyers dream of. It's contemporaneous, it's observable, and it's devastating. No suspension for anyone who's flagrantly fouled Clark. Not one. That's selective enforcement. Plain and simple. That's the kind of thing that screams bias. And when the same actions are punished differently depending on the victim, that's textbook disparate treatment. The Marina Mabry incident was no basketball play. It was a blindside hit. The kind of hit that ends careers, not just possessions. It was brushed off as just a hard foul. If that had happened to anyone else, would it have been treated the same? Or was it ignored because it happened to her? DJ Carrington's play from last season was another near tragedy. These aren't just rough games, they're red flags. Clark is a flagrant foul away from a career-ending injury. That's not drama. It's a fact backed by video and data. And the league is playing a dangerous game of denial. What makes this all so chilling is that it's not coming from sports media. It's coming from the Wall Street Journal, a business outlet, a publication that deals in markets, not memes. And they are saying the WNBA may be sitting on a civil rights time bomb. Clark isn't just raising TV ratings. She's building fan loyalty. App engagement tells us people aren't just watching. They're investing emotionally. They're downloading, engaging, buying. They're here. And if the league doesn't recognize that, they deserve every dollar they lose. Sponsors are watching. Fans are watching. And now the government is watching. If this spirals into full-blown investigation, the league may never recover. Because this isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about rights, law, and justice. And if the WNBA doesn't course correct and fast, it may find itself on the wrong side of history. Because what started as a rookie sensation story has now morphed into a potential federal scandal. The Wall Street Journal didn't just expose a problem. They pulled the thread on the entire fabric of the league. And what unravels next could change everything. Let us know what you think down below. Is Caitlin Clark being targeted? Is this a hostile work environment in disguise? Are we watching a civil rights violation happen in real time? One thing for sure, this story is far from over. And the next chapter may be written in court, not on the court.